Hey, this is Brandon with Pickleball Effect. Today we're doing a review of the new Electrum Model E Elite. I'm really excited to review this one because this is the paddle that Colin Johns is playing with. Colin Johns is Electrum's top signed pro and one of the best men's doubles player in the world. He's been playing with Electrum's original Model E for probably close to a couple of years now. Since Electrum came out with the Model E, they've introduced a few other models, but Colin never switched to those, but he is switching to this one, which is why I'm so interested in it. This is Electrum's thermoformed paddle with the foam injection around the perimeter. We're seeing thermoformed paddles come out from nearly every brand now, but they are doing a couple of things differently. The first thing they're doing differently is with the face. So they're using what they're calling graphene reinforced carbon fiber. When you feel it, it feels like your typical raw carbon fiber grit. But when you do a quick search on Google, you can see that it's a material that's similar to carbon fiber, but it's supposedly a little stronger and a little stiffer. I don't know how that's going to affect the playability of the paddle, so that's something I'll be paying attention to. The other thing that they're doing differently is in regards to the handle. So instead of having two foam inserts like most brands do, they have a carbon forged handle similar to the Ben Johns Yola paddle. So you can take a look at it here. You can see that's a little more oval shaped. I wish it was more octagonal, but that's what they're giving us. And then when we look at the specs of the rest of the paddle, it has the same elongated shape as the original E. This is the only shape that they offer for this paddle. It has a static weight of 8 to 8.3 ounces, a handle length of 5.25 inches, and a handle circumference of 4.5 inches. However, when you put a measuring tape around it, it's actually closer to 4.25 rather than 4.5. It felt a little smaller than 4.5, so I'm glad I measured it because it is a little smaller. And then it has a 16 millimeter core and a swing weight of 121. 121 is kind of your standard or typical swing weight for elongated paddles. Elongated paddles are generally a little more head heavy naturally, and so this kind of falls in line with the standard swing weight of what we see for elongated shapes. And then it has a twist weight of 6.93. Twist weight is a new measurement that I'm getting for paddles. It gives you an idea of how stable a paddle is. So the higher the twist weight, the less likely the paddle is to rotate in your hands on off-center shots. So this is actually a really high measurement, especially for an elongated shape. So this indicates that the paddle could have a better size sweet spot than other paddles that have a lower swing weight that are also elongated. So this is the Electrum Model E Elite. Let's go put it on the court and see how it plays. After drilling and playing with the paddle over the course of 2 weeks, here's my thoughts on its performance. I'll start with what I liked, and then I'll talk about what I didn't like. Of all the elongated thermoformed paddles I've played so far, I thought this one was the easiest to control. The ball doesn't jump off as much as the other thermos, which makes it easier to absorb pace, hit your drops, and keep the ball down when you need to. I found my soft game a lot quicker with this paddle than I have with the others. When it came to the feel of the paddle, I also thought it had a softer feel, at least compared to other elongated thermoform paddles. To test my theory, I did a speed gun test with the Model E Elite, Vatic Pro V7, Carbon 1X, and the Legacy Pro. The Model E Elite did have the lowest numbers on the speed test, which confirmed my theory that it doesn't hit quite as hard as the others. The V7 and Legacy Pro were in the middle of the bunch, and the 1X hit the hardest out of the four. So if you're looking for a softer hitting thermo because it's harder for you to control the added power of the others, that makes this a good option. Sticking with the control aspects of the paddle, I mentioned that the paddle has a high twist weight, and this proved true to me. I thought it was very stable and solid. There were certainly some shots I hit really close to the edge guard, but they still stayed in, so I like that. Speaking of power, it still offers more than your Generation 1 carbon fiber paddles, though it's not as powerful as the other thermos mentioned. So you get some added offense, and the spin was big so you could shape the ball how you needed. For some reason, I could drive the ball really well with this paddle, and I was hitting a lot of really good drives that were low and hard to deal with. The handle length was 5.25 inches, and I personally like that length over 5.5. I can still get a second hand on there when I need to, but I don't feel like the handle takes too much surface area away from the paddle. Last thing I'll mention is the weight. The original Model E was very heavy and cumbersome to move around. The E Elite is better in that area. It didn't feel as heavy as the original and was on par with the maneuverability side of things compared to similar paddles. So let's move on to talk about what I didn't like. Out of the box, the paddle feels really good in the sweet spot, but there's a fairly dramatic difference in the feel just outside of the sweet spot. It wasn't a gradual change like most paddles and was very stiff feeling. However, over the course of 2 weeks playing with it, I either got used to it or the paddle sort of broke in a bit and it started to feel more consistent to me across the face. So if you decide to get this paddle, then know that it might not feel the best the first few times you play with it as you adjust to it and break the paddle in. I have to talk about the grip too. I'm not a fan of Electrum's grip. No brand should be using those dumb ribbed grips. It feels uncomfortable and the fake leather gets slippery when your hands are sweaty. I took the original grip off and replaced it with 2 over grips, and I liked that a lot more. As far as the shape of the handle, it has that oval shape. I'd rather have an octagonal shape, but it wasn't a deal breaker or anything, you just get used to it. I also don't like that Electrum only offers this paddle as an elongated shape. I think a lot of people would like to have this in a standard shape and wish they offered more shape options. So here's my recommendation. This is one of the more muted thermoformed paddles I've played so far, though it still hits harder than your typical control paddle. And I'm guessing this is a result of the graphene reinforced carbon fiber. This makes it a nice option for players coming from a soft, control-oriented paddle like, say, a Selkirk Vanguard, and want more power but don't want to go all in on the power like a Carbon 1X that may be too poppy for you. Conversely, if you're looking for that big power, then you might pick a different thermoform paddle other than the Model E Elite. Overall, I think it was a solid paddle. It's on the pricier side of $200, but I like that it plays a little differently than other thermos I've played, and it has its own identity as more of a control-oriented thermo paddle. It also has a good warranty at 6 months, which is nice, especially for a thermoformed paddle. And interestingly enough, I think this paddle seems to fit Colin John's play style really well, so I see why he uses it now. If you like how Colin plays or have a similar play style as him that's patient and calculated, then you might like this one too. So that's everything I have. Thanks for watching, and I hope it helped.